Imagine this. You open an old family album from the 1800s, and tucked between two faded pages is a photograph of three sisters. Their dresses are Victorian. Their skin is pale. Their faces are perfectly still, but something is wrong. One of the girls, the youngest, has dirt under her fingernails. Her eyelids are slightly swollen. Her neck has a faint bruise from struggling. And when you look closer, you realize the horrifying truth. This girl wasn't dead when the photograph was taken. She was buried alive, dug out by mistake, and posed as a corpse while she was still fighting for breath. But here's the part that ruins your sleep. People who stare at this photograph long enough say the girl's eyes open a little more each time. Some swear she moves. Some claim she tries to speak. And some? They never sleep normally again. Tonight, you will hear the full story behind the Holloway Sisters, the cursed post-mortem photograph that refuses to stay still, and the girl who died twice. Welcome to Forgotten Remains. The photograph was never supposed to resurface. For more than a century, it was locked away in the attic of a burned-down orphanage, hidden beneath a pile of warped wood and the charred remains of forgotten children. No one knew why the building's caretaker had kept it, until a demolition crew uncovered a blackened metal box with a single glass plate image inside. A sepia-toned picture. A family of 3 girls, and one of them unmistakably dead. But that wasn't the part that terrified the workers. What chilled them was the girl's eyes, wide open, glassy yet strangely aware, like she was staring straight through the camera, straight into the person holding it. The youngest worker, a 19-year-old named Caleb, was the first to touch the photograph. The moment his fingers brushed the cold glass plate, he whispered, "Why is she breathing?" He dropped it instantly. The others laughed, nervously, thinking it was a morbid joke. But Caleb knew what he saw, because in the fraction of a second he held that photograph, the dead girl's chest had risen. The Holloway family had lived on the outskirts of Willow Creek, Missouri in 1863, a widow mother and her 3 daughters. Clara, the eldest at 16, was known for her intelligence and unsettling calm. Margaret, 14, often said she could hear voices when the wind moved through the cornfields. And Lillian, the youngest, was barely 11. Lillian had always been the quiet one, a shadow behind her sisters, until the night she was buried alive. Caleb couldn't sleep. The image haunted him. The dead girl's faint breath, the way her pupils seemed to adjust to the light. At 3:17 a.m., he sat up, drenched in sweat. Something stood in the corner of his bedroom, a child-sized figure, motionless. Watching him, Caleb fumbled for the lamp, his fingers trembling, the bulb flickering to life just long enough for him to see. The figure was gone, but on the floor, right beneath where it had stood, was the same photograph, the one he had left inside the demolition office. Except now it looked different. Clara and Margaret still stared stiffly, their expressions hollow. But little Lillian, her head had subtly, unmistakably shifted. In this version, she was no longer looking at the camera. She was looking at him. Caleb backed away, breath shallow, until he hit the wall. The house seemed to tighten around him, the air heavier, colder. Something whispered behind him. "Don't let them bury me again." He froze. The voice was not human. It was layered, painful, like soil shifting in a coffin. He turned slowly. The room was empty, but the smell of damp earth filled the air, thick and suffocating. Caleb grabbed the photograph, intending to throw it out the window. But the moment he touched the glass plate again, he saw something new. Behind the 3 girls, barely visible in the shadows, was a 4th figure. Long hair, sunken eyes, skin pulled tight across bones. A girl that wasn't supposed to be in the photograph at all. A girl with a mouthful of dirt. A girl clawing up from behind them, as if she had been buried alive and posed for the picture after digging herself out. Caleb dropped the photo. But before it hit the floor, a hand, small, pale, trembling, shot out from the darkness beneath his bed and caught it. Then slowly, deliberately, dragged it back under. Caleb didn't stay to see what came out next. He ran out of the room, out of the house, out into the street barefoot and shaking. He didn't notice the small, muddy footprints forming behind him, or the soft patter of soil falling from the air, as something followed. Something that had waited more than a century to be found. Something that wanted the truth uncovered, whether the living were ready for it or not. Caleb didn't stop running until the sun rose. He collapsed on the front steps of an old gas station miles away, his clothes damp with sweat, his feet cut by gravel, his throat raw from breathing cold night air. But none of that frightened him as much as what he carried in his shaking hands. The photograph. He hadn't meant to take it. He had left it on his bedroom floor. He remembered that clearly, but when he burst into the street last night, somewhere between fear and delirium, he must have grabbed it, or maybe it had followed him. The glass plate felt warm now. Warm like skin. He wrapped it inside his jacket and walked into the gas station, desperate to feel normal again. But the cashier, an old woman with milky white, cataract-filled eyes, froze the moment she saw him. Or rather, the moment she saw what he was holding, her voice cracked as she whispered, "Where did you get that?" Caleb didn't answer. He wasn't sure he could. The woman stepped out from behind the counter with surprising speed, reached for the photograph, then snatched her hand back like she'd touched fire. "You shouldn't have that," she said. "They'll come for you now." Caleb swallowed. "Who?" The woman's throat bobbed as she whispered. "The Holloway Sisters." She dragged him into a back office lined with old newspapers, yellowed photos, and dusty county records. On the wall hung a map of the Ozarks. Pinned on it were circles, dozens of them, all centered around one name: Holloway Farm, 1863. The old woman sat him down. "I'm Rose," she said. "My grandmother was the midwife who tended the Holloways. She was there the day Lillian died." Caleb stared at her. "Died? That girl in the photo." His voice broke. "She breathed. I saw her breathe." Rose's expression tightened. "Of course she did. That's the problem." She shuffled through a drawer and pulled out a brittle diary, its pages held together with black string. The cover read, "Martha Hayes, Willow Creek midwife." Rose opened it. "People think Lillian died of fever," she said. "But my grandmother wrote the real cause." She pointed to a shaky line of writing. "The Holloway girls are not meant for ordinary death." Caleb felt his skin crawl. "Clara was born during the eclipse," Rose continued. "Margaret during the night of the blood moon. And Lillian, the one you saw, she was born during the 7-day storm of 52. People said they were blessed. Others said cursed." Caleb's voice trembled. "What happened to Lillian?" Rose hesitated, then whispered, "She was buried alive." "But not by accident." The room went silent. Caleb felt cold inside. Rose continued, "The Holloway mother, Grace, believed her daughters had a gift, that they could speak to the dead. But Lillian, she was different. She went too deep. She began waking at night covered in dirt, saying she had been visiting friends underground." Caleb tightened his grip on the photo. "So Grace tried to end it," Rose said. "She held a funeral, buried Lillian in the family plot. But the next morning," she leaned closer, "the coffin was empty." Caleb's breath stopped. Rose's voice dropped lower, and Lillian was found back in her room, sitting on the bed, smiling. Caleb looked down at the glass plate photo. Lillian's tiny face stared back, except she wasn't smiling, not in the original photograph, but in this one. Her lips, they had curled just slightly upward, a dead girl's smile, fresh, recent. "Burn it," Caleb said suddenly. "I need to burn this thing." Rose shook her head so fast her bun unraveled. "No. Fire won't take it. Then I'll throw it in the river. Water won't work either." Caleb stood up, shaking. "Then what do I do?" Rose stared at him. "You take it back." Caleb froze. "Back where?" Rose pointed to the map, directly at a small marked circle surrounded by dense forest. "Holloway burial ground." "She wants to go home," Rose whispered. "If you don't return her, she'll keep following you. Each night closer. Each night stronger. And once she climbs out of your bed," her voice trembled, "you won't wake up again." A sudden thump made them both jump. Then another, closer, heavier. The thumping moved down the hallway, slow and dragging, like something pulling its weight across the floor. Rose's eyes widened. "She's already here," she breathed. "She came faster than I expected." The lights flickered. The air thickened. Something scraped across the other side of the office door, soft at first, then sharper, like nails or bones. Caleb took a step back. Rose grabbed his hand. "You need to run," she whispered. "Now." A small voice at the door whispered back, "Let me in." "I brought my sisters." The lights went out. The office door rattled, not violently. Slowly. Deliberately, as if whoever or whatever stood on the other side was enjoying the anticipation. Rose's grip tightened on Caleb's wrist. "Don't speak," she whispered. "They hear your breath." The lights were dead. The air had gone icy, thick, hard to inhale. It smelled like overturned soil and rotting flowers, the scent of a grave recently opened. The doorknob twisted, once, twice. Then it stopped, as a small, pale fingertip slid through the gap beneath the door. A child's finger, except it wasn't soft. It was gray. Shriveled. Dirt clung beneath the nail. Caleb stumbled backward, his heel hitting the filing cabinet, sending a metallic crash through the darkness. The thing at the door froze. Then, 3 distinct taps. Tap, tap, tap. Rose's lips trembled. "That's not just Lillian," she whispered. "Clara and Margaret, they came too." Caleb felt his stomach turn. 3 dead sisters, standing inches away. He clutched the photo tighter, but the moment he did, it pulsed. Like a heartbeat. The doorknob began to turn again, this time faster. Rose acted first. She shoved open the dusty window at the back of the office. Cold morning light sliced into the room. "Go," she whispered. "They hate daylight." Caleb climbed onto the desk beneath the window. Rose pushed him upward, but froze mid-motion when all three voices whispered from behind the door. "Rose, we remember you." Her blood ran cold. Caleb turned. "What does that mean?" "My grandmother tried to stop their burial ritual," Rose said. "The sisters remember anyone who interferes." The door thumped hard. Rose pushed him again. "Go, now." Caleb climbed out into the alley, landing on gravel. He turned back. "Come with me." But Rose shook her head. "They followed you, not me." "You still have a chance." Behind her, the office door cracked. A single pale hand slithered through the widening gap, pulling splinters of wood with it. Rose shoved the window down, sealing herself inside. Caleb heard her final words through the glass. "Run to the forest. Return the girl, or she'll never stop." Then the office went silent. Too silent. Something moved inside. Soft. Wet. Like hands dragging across flesh. And then a sound Caleb would never forget. Rose's muffled scream, abruptly cut off. Caleb turned and ran. The sun had barely risen over the tree line, the sky still gray, the air damp with lingering fog. Caleb sprinted past the gas pumps, across the cracked asphalt and toward the county road. He didn't dare look back, not after hearing what was happening behind that window. He ran until his lungs burned, until his legs felt numb, until the forest loomed tall and dark before him, the same forest circled on Rose's map. Holloway burial ground, somewhere inside. Branches cracked behind him. Leaves shifted. He wasn't alone. Caleb turned slowly. At first he saw nothing. Then the fog began to thicken, rolling low across the road, moving unnaturally fast, like fingers creeping along the ground. A small silhouette stepped out from the mist. A girl, barefoot, in a ragged dress, her head tilted slightly, as if listening. Caleb's throat tightened. Lillian. She stood perfectly still, hands clasped as if posing for a funeral portrait, but her face twitched. Her jaw shifted, and her neck cracked loudly as her head slowly straightened. Her eyes, empty pale gray, looked directly at him, and she smiled. The same fresh smile he had seen appear in the photograph. Caleb backed away. Another shape stepped out of the fog. Then another. 3 girls. Clara, Margaret, Lillian, all in funeral dresses that fluttered even without wind. Caleb clutched the glass plate photo to his chest. The sisters stepped forward in unison. 1 step. Another. Their bare feet left dark prints on the asphalt. Dirt. Grave soil. "Stay away," he whispered. Lillian tilted her head again. Her voice was small, childlike. "Wrong. You opened my eyes, Caleb. Now let me open yours." He turned and bolted into the woods. Branches whipped his face. Roots caught his ankles. But he didn't stop running. The sisters' footsteps didn't sound like normal children running. They were too fast. Too synchronized. Too close. In the distance, Caleb heard something else. A slow, rhythmic pounding, like a second heartbeat. Except it wasn't coming from him. It was coming from the photograph. Every time he stumbled, every time he gasped, the glass plate thumped, like something inside it was trying to get out. He ran deeper into the forest until he found a clearing. At the center stood 3 small, sunken graves. Weather-worn stones. Cracked. Crooked. The names were faint, but readable. Clara Holloway. Margaret Holloway. Lillian Holloway. He'd found the burial ground. Behind him, the footsteps stopped. Caleb turned slowly, and the 3 sisters stood at the tree line, watching him. Their dead eyes glowed faintly in the rising daylight. Lillian lifted her hand and pointed to her own grave. Caleb swallowed hard. Is this what you want?" he whispered, holding up the photograph. Lillian nodded. But then, she said one word, a word that made the ground beneath him shiver. Not return. Replace. The sisters stepped closer. Caleb stumbled back. The earth behind him crumbled, and he fell straight into Lillian's grave. The sisters leaned over the edge, smiling down at him, as the photo in his hand cracked loudly, splintering like bone. Caleb hit the bottom of Lillian Holloway's grave with a thud that knocked the breath from his lungs. Dirt rained down around him, cold and damp, carrying the suffocating smell of old rot and forgotten bones. He scrambled upright, but the walls of the pit weren't normal. They weren't just earth. They pulsed, like breathing soil. His fingers sank into it as if it were wet flesh. Above him, the 3 Holloway sisters leaned over the edge of the grave, their pale faces framed by the gray morning light. Their eyes were the worst part, clouded, hollow, swirling like storm water. Lillian tilted her head, bones cracking. "You lie in my place," she whispered. Clara and Margaret spoke next, perfectly synchronized. Balance must be restored. The ground vibrated, The photograph in Caleb's hand trembled violently. He looked at the glass plate. Lillian's face was gone. Her place in the portrait was empty. In her spot was a faint, blurry outline, matching the shape of him. Caleb's heart almost stopped. "They're replacing me in the photograph," he choked. "They're trying to trap me inside it." Lillian climbed down into the grave. Not stepped, not slid, climbed. Her limbs bending at impossible angles. Hands gripping the dirt like a spider descending its web. She landed silently, her bare feet sinking into the soil. Caleb pressed himself against the wall of the grave. Lillian stood inches from him, her face expressionless but twitching, like she was learning how to smile for the first time. "You touched my picture," she whispered. "So now it touches you." She pressed her small hand against Caleb's chest. Instantly, a jolt of searing cold shot through him. He gasped, feeling something, some invisible force pulling at him through his ribs, as though his soul were being unstitched from his body thread by thread. Up above, Clara and Margaret began a low, humming chant. A burial hymn, but twisted, wrong. Caleb's legs buckled, his vision blurred. The world grew distant, muffled, gray. Lillian's eyes rolled back as she whispered, "Give me your breath. Give me your place. Give me your life." Caleb tried to push her away, but his arms felt like they were sinking into cement. He screamed. His voice didn't echo. The grave absorbed the sound. Then, a crack. The photograph shattered in his hand. A sharp, jagged shard sliced into his palm. Blood hit the dirt. Everything stopped. The chanting ceased. Lillian froze, her head snapping upright like a puppet on pulled strings. She stared at the blood-soaked soil, and her lips curled into a hungry grin. Clara and Margaret hissed in unison. Lillian whispered, her voice trembling with joy, "He bleeds. We can bind him." She bent down and scooped a handful of Caleb's blood-soaked dirt, bringing it to her nose and inhaling deeply like it was perfume. Her pupils dilated. Her breathing quickened. She opened her mouth and ate the dirt. Caleb gagged as he watched the mud and blood smear across her teeth. She swallowed, then said, "Now you are part of the earth, and the earth belongs to us." The grave shuddered violently. Dirt collapsed inward. Caleb screamed as soil piled onto his legs, pinning him. He clawed upward, but every handful of dirt he threw aside was instantly replaced by more. The grave was filling on its own, fast. He looked up desperately. Clara and Margaret stood silent at the rim, watching the burial like it was a ceremony they'd rehearsed for decades. Lillian leaned close to his ear. "You breathe for me now," she whispered. Caleb's fingers brushed the shattered photo shards, and he felt something he didn't expect. Warmth. The smallest piece of glass was glowing faintly, like it was reacting to his blood. He grabbed it, ignoring the sting. The sisters froze. Clara hissed, "No!" Lillian lunged. Caleb slashed the shard across her face. A streak of black, oily smoke burst from the wound. Lillian shrieked, a high, shrill wail that shook the trees. Clara and Margaret recoiled. The grave walls loosened. Caleb shoved upward with everything he had. He clawed at the edge, his fingers grabbing roots and rocks, his legs kicking through collapsing soil. He dragged himself out, coughing, shaking, smeared in blood and dirt. The sisters didn't chase him. Not yet. They simply stood at the grave's edge, swaying silently. Lillian wiped the black smoke from her cheek. Her smile returned, stretched, crooked, horrifying. "You hurt me once," she whispered. "But you can't hurt me twice." Caleb staggered backward. Lillian stepped forward, her voice echoing through the forest. "We'll finish the burial at night. Then." The forest went silent. The sisters vanished, and the photo shard in Caleb's hand went cold. He stumbled away from the graves, breath shaking, heart pounding. Behind him, 3 small hands slowly, silently rose from the freshly disturbed soil, reaching for him. Caleb ran. Branches whipped his face, roots clawed at his ankles, the forest floor sank and shifted under his feet like rotting lungs. But he didn't dare slow down because the woods were changing. The light was dying, not fading, dying. A strange dusk fell far too early, like the sun was being pulled down by unseen hands. Shadows thickened unnaturally, stretching across the path, crawling up tree trunks like living things trying to hide from what was coming. Caleb could hear them behind him. Not footsteps. Whispers. 3 voices. High, small, and wrong, layering over each other like tangled threads of a lullaby sung backwards. "Caleb, don't run. We already know where you are." His chest burned as he sprinted past fallen logs and ancient stones covered in ghostly moss. The photo shard in his hand pulsed faintly, as if reacting to the forest's darkening heartbeat. Then, a child's giggle echoed ahead of him. He skidded to a stop. The sound came from the trees. From above. Slowly he looked up. Lillian Holloway hung upside down from a branch, her pale face inches above his own. Her hair dangled like a curtain of dead vines, her neck bending farther than any human neck should. Her smile widened, that same stretched, unnatural grin. "You left before the burial was done," she whispered. "That's rude." Caleb stumbled backward, tripping over a root. He hit the ground hard. Lillian dropped, not fell, dropped straight down like gravity decided she belonged on the forest floor. She landed silently on all fours, crawling toward him like a starving animal. Caleb scrambled up and sprinted again. This time, the forest turned against him. Every direction he ran, the trees seemed to shift, twisting into new shapes, blocking paths that had been clear moments ago. The woods were rearranging themselves, trapping him. He pushed through a thick patch of bushes and froze, because standing in the clearing ahead were Clara and Margaret, both facing away from him. Both motionless. Their long nightgowns fluttered in a wind that wasn't there. Margaret slowly lifted her head, not turning, just lifting, like someone pulling invisible strings. Her voice floated. "You cannot run from the earth," Clara finished, "when the earth already claimed you." Caleb bolted left. But Lillian was suddenly there, walking toward him with her head tilted, dragging her fingertips across tree bark, leaving black streaks behind. Everywhere he turned, they were there. 3 pale figures. 3 dead sisters. 3 hunters. They moved like flickers. One blink and they vanished. The next blink and they stood inches from his face. He stumbled backward until he hit a massive dead oak. His lungs felt tight. His vision blurred. "Stop," he gasped. "Please." Lillian stepped forward first. "Why would we stop?" she whispered. "You're already part of our picture." Clara reached into the folds of her nightgown and pulled something out. Caleb's blood ran cold. It was another photograph. A glass plate, but this one had a new silhouette inside it. His silhouette, the edges were forming, his outline sharpening, like the picture was finishing itself. Lillian whispered, "When the picture completes, you stop breathing." Margaret lifted her hand. The forest answered. Leaves rustled in circles. Roots slithered across the ground like snakes. The earth swelled upward, forming shapes, fingers, hands, arms made of soil reaching for his ankles. Caleb kicked wildly, breaking free and sprinting blindly through the trees in pure panic. The sisters followed, not running, appearing, always ahead, always closer. Night was falling fast, the sky turning charcoal gray. And as the last sliver of sunlight vanished, Lillian's voice hissed across the forest. "When darkness comes, we finish what our mother started." A sharp wind burst through the woods. Branches bent. Trees groaned. The ground beneath him rippled like water. He crashed into a narrow, rocky path, the edge of a cliff. Behind him, Clara. To his right, Margaret. To his left, Lillian. They closed the triangle around him, all smiling now. Margaret lifted the photograph again. The image was almost complete. Caleb's face was forming. His eyes were hollow in the picture. His mouth was sewn shut. He choked on a scream. Lillian stepped forward, her small, dirt-stained hands reaching toward his face. "Don't be afraid," she whispered softly. "We'll bury you gently." Caleb's heel slipped on loose gravel. He stumbled backward toward the cliff edge. The last thing he heard before he fell was all 3 sisters whispering in perfect harmony, "Good night, Caleb." And then he tumbled off the cliff. You've reached the episode where the truth is no longer hiding. It's breathing. Night fell over Holloway House like a shroud pulled over a corpse, but it brought something else too. The sound of breathing. Slow, deep, deliberate, not human and not coming from any single direction. It moved through the hallways like a living fog. Elena pressed her back against the wall, her lantern flickering violently as if suffocating in the same air that carried that breath. At first, she thought it was just the wind, but the wind does not inhale, and it definitely does not exhale directly behind your ear. A cold, wet gust brushed the fine hairs along her neck. Elena froze. Then came a whisper, low, cracked, and sounding exactly like a voice that had spent decades buried under earth. She woke up first. Elena staggered forward, swiping her lantern behind her. No one. Nothing. Only darkness so thick it felt solid. Her breath shook. She woke up first. Elena whispered back, repeating the words like trying to solve a puzzle. Which one? Marjorie? Eloise? Another whisper, right beside her cheek this time. Neither. Elena spun, and the lantern slipped from her hands. The flame didn't go out when it hit the floor. It went out in midair, snuffed by something unseen. Total, crushing, coffin-dark blackness swallowed her. And then, thump, it came from beneath her feet, like a knock from under a wooden lid. A coffin lid. Elena's chest tightened as the memory slammed into her. The Holloway sisters were photographed post-mortem, but one of them was rumored to have buried alive. Another thump, this one stronger. She dropped to her knees, palms flat against the dusty wooden floorboards. She shouldn't have touched it, because something on the other side touched back. A set of fingers, thin, impossibly cold, pressed upward against her palm. Elena screamed and jerked her hand away. The floor began to pulse. Up, down, like a slow heartbeat. Elena scrambled backward, crawling in pure terror, but the heartbeat followed her. Thump, thump, thump. Then, like a whisper slithering through the boards, "Let me out." Her head spun. No, this house is empty. You're dead. All of you are dead." The reply shook the entire corridor. We were not dead. The walls quivered. Dust rained from the rafters. Something huge moved behind the plaster. Something crawling sideways like an insect, but far too heavy, far too human. Elena staggered to her feet and ran, but the breathing followed her. Longer now. Hungrier now. She reached the old staircase, grabbed the railing. A hand grabbed hers back. Not a warm hand, not a living hand. A stiff, cold hand with nails as long as claws. Her lantern's tiny remaining ember flickered just enough to illuminate the thing holding her. And she saw a face. One eye open. One eye stitched shut. Dirt packed into the nostrils. Skin collapsed from years of rot. But the mouth was moving. "Help me." Elena tore free and stumbled down the stairs, hitting the floor hard enough to knock the breath out of her. But when she opened her eyes, there were feet standing in front of her. Small feet. Bare. Filthy. Child-sized. She slowly lifted her gaze, up past the long, tangled hair. Up past the dirt-gray skin. Up to two wide, unnatural, glassy eyes staring directly into her soul. One of the Holloway sisters. Not dead. Not alive. Something else. The girl tilted her head unnaturally far, bones crackling like broken twigs. "You heard us," the girl whispered. Her voice echoed twice. Once from her mouth, and a deeper echo from somewhere inside the walls. We woke up in the dark, alone. Screaming. Clawing. We waited for someone to hear. Elena crawled backward, shaking uncontrollably. "I shouldn't be here," Elena whispered. "I shouldn't." The girl took a step, then another. The floor creaked, but her feet didn't make a sound. "We waited," she repeated. "And now, we want out." Behind the girl, the shadows shifted, stretching into tall silhouettes. Two more forms, sisters. Elena got to her feet and ran blindly toward the exit hall, but the girl's voice stopped her cold. "You can't leave, Miss Elena." The sound of her name was like ice water poured straight into her heart. "How do you? You came here. You opened the house," the girl whispered, smiling a smile that didn't belong on a human face. "And now someone must stay." The breathing grew louder. Closer, right behind her. Every direction at once. Elena's world went dark as something wrapped around her waist. Cold, thin, root-like fingers. The last thing she saw before she was dragged into the shadows was the Holloway girl's smile widening, revealing a mouth full of dirt. You've reached the episode where the Holloway legend stops being a rumor and becomes a recorded memory of their final living night. This is where the truth stops whispering and starts screaming. Elena didn't remember blacking out. She only remembered opening her eyes in a place that smelled like damp soil and rotting roots. Her fingers sank into dirt. Her elbows scraped wood. Her breath rebounded off a low ceiling. It took her exactly 3 seconds to understand where she was. Inside. A coffin. Her scream ricocheted inside the box, shaking the dust loose. She pushed against the lid. It didn't move. Her lungs shrank with terror. No. Let me out. Something outside the coffin tapped back. Once. Twice. Then a whisper seeped through the cracks in the wood. "Now you know." Elena froze. The voice was young. Female. "Not alone. We woke up just like you." Another voice rasped faintly. "We were supposed to sleep forever," a third one murmured. Elena's pulse slammed against her ribs. So the legend was true. You were buried. Alive. All 3 voices spoke at once. And then everything went silent. Only Elena's breathing remained, loud, frantic, suffocating. She was losing air. Panic made every inhale feel like fire. "Please," she whispered. "Tell me what happened. Why were you buried alive?" The voices didn't respond at first. The quiet stretched until it felt like eternity itself was holding its breath. Then, the youngest one finally spoke. Her voice shimmered with a horror so old it no longer belonged to a child. "It was our father." Elena's blood turned cold. "He told the town we were sick," the oldest Holloway sister whispered through the wood. "He said we carried a curse. He said we weren't normal," the middle sister added, "because of the things we saw." They began to speak over one another, their voices overlapping like spiraling echoes. "We could see what others couldn't. We warned him about the shadow that followed him. He thought we were witches. He locked us in our rooms. He prayed over us for days. He waited for a sign." Elena's chest tightened further. "What sign?" The youngest answered. The night our mother died, he heard us laughing. Elena felt the blood drain from her body. But we weren't laughing, the oldest sister said quietly. We were screaming, the middle sister whispered. He thought the devil was inside us, the youngest finished. The coffin walls trembled as if reacting to their pain. And then? Elena whispered. He drugged our tea, the oldest said. We woke up in wooden boxes, the middle breathed. We couldn't move, couldn't scream, the youngest choked. And the dirt began falling over us. Elena felt her heart clawing against her chest. The youngest continued, voice cracking. We scratched until our fingers snapped. We screamed until our throats tore. We waited for someone to hear us. The dirt above Elena shifted. Someone was moving around her coffin now. Who's there? She gasped. The answer was instant. Father. Elena's breath seized. But he's dead. The sisters laughed softly, a hollow, broken sound. He didn't stay dead. The scratching around her coffin grew louder, more violent. He walks the soil above us every night, the oldest whispered. He keeps burying what he thinks still breathes, the middle added. He thinks you're one of us now, the youngest finished. A boom exploded above Elena. A massive weight slammed against the lid. Dust cascaded onto her face. He found you, the sisters whispered. Another boom. The wood bowed inward. Elena screamed, pounding back. Stop! Let me out. The sisters' voices turned sharp, urgent. Don't scream. He thinks screaming means you're alive. Too late. The lid cracked. Through the splintered wood, Elena saw something. A massive silhouette. Bent. Twisted. Covered in mud and funeral clothes. A face leaning over her. Rotten. Sunken. More skeleton than man. And eyes. Pale, milky, endless, locked onto her. He dragged his nails across the coffin lid, slow and deliberate. Then he whispered, in a voice deeper than the soil, You should not breathe underground. Elena kicked against the sides of the coffin, thrashing wildly. Another strike from above splintered the entire top plank. A hand pushed through, a hand that should have been dust centuries ago. Help me! She screamed. And suddenly, 3 smaller hands pressed against the outside of her coffin. The Holloway Sisters. We'll help you, the youngest said. But when we open this box, the dirt rumbled. You must not look at him. The coffin lid exploded open. Hands, cold, thin, and trembling, grabbed Elena's arms and ripped her upward through the soil, her lungs filled with the sweet sting of air. But she made a mistake. She opened her eyes, and she looked directly at the thing clawing up after her. Her scream echoed across the graveyard as the towering, undead father of the Holloway girls rose from the ground, still trying to bury anything that dared breathe. Elena lay on the cold, moonlit dirt, coughing up soil. Her vision throbbed, blurred at the edges. The Holloway sisters kneeling beside her looked pale, translucent, almost unreal. Don't move, the oldest whispered sharply. He's still watching. Elena forced herself to lie still, though her heart wouldn't listen, hammering so loud she could hear it in her skull. The grave behind her trembled. Heavy steps circled the broken coffin. Elena didn't dare turn. He can't see you, the middle sister said. But he can feel you. The youngest leaned so close her cold breath grazed Elena's ear. That's why you should not have looked at him. Elena swallowed hard. She couldn't speak yet, not without her voice trembling into panic. The undead father's footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, CRRRRRKKK. A long, splintering groan of coffin wood twisting as the corpse lowered itself back into the earth. He returns to his rest, the oldest murmured, watching the dirt shift. He always does, until something breathes too close to his ground. The grave stilled. The moonlight flickered like it had exhaled in relief. Elena finally sat up, shaking uncontrollably. What is he?" she whispered. The sisters did not answer. Instead, they all looked toward the tree line as if expecting someone, or something, to approach. "He is not what he once was," the middle sister finally said. "He was a cruel man when he lived. But in death," the youngest shuddered. "The curse made him worse." Elena's breath hitched. "What curse?" The sisters exchanged a look, an old, heavy, secret-laden look. The oldest finally spoke. "We were not buried alive because he feared us." She stepped closer, her bare feet silent on the soil. "We were buried alive because he feared what followed us." Elena frowned. "You mean ghosts? A demon?" The youngest shook her head slowly. "No, something older." "Older than what?" Again, silence. Then the middle sister whispered, "Older than the Ozarks." Leaves rustled in the distance, though no wind blew. "It touched our bloodline generations before we were born," the oldest continued. A whisper passed from mother to daughter. The youngest pointed at Elena's throat. "You heard it too." "In the coffin," Elena's skin prickled with goosebumps. That whisper wasn't human. The sisters nodded, 3 identical, unnervingly slow nods. The oldest continued. It calls to those trapped between life and death. The middle added. It binds itself to souls that cannot find their way. The youngest finished. And it makes them hunger for others like them. Elena stared at them, heartbeat pounding in her ears. You're saying your father wasn't resurrected by accident? No, the oldest said. He was awakened, because we woke. The youngest stepped closer, her eyes glowing faint blue under the moon. And because you woke too. Elena backed up. What does that mean? Their expressions softened. Not with kindness, but with pity. You survived the coffin, the middle sister whispered. You breathed where no breath belongs. The youngest leaned in again, her cold fingers brushing Elena's cheek. That makes you one of us now. Elena shot to her feet. No, I'm alive. I'm human. The sisters looked at one another again. The oldest stepped forward, touching Elena's hand, and Elena felt something like a static shock ripple up her arm straight into her skull. For a second, she saw darkness, soil, wood. 3 other coffins beside her, 3 sets of hands pounding against lids, 3 voices screaming in the earth, a father shoveling dirt with no mercy, a whisper curling through the roots like a serpent. Wake! Elena stumbled back, gasping. What was that? Our memory, the oldest said. Our curse, the middle added. Our invitation, the youngest finished. Elena shook her head violently. No, I'm leaving. I'm done. I did not come here for this. You came here for the photograph, the oldest reminded her softly, and you found the truth behind it. The middle added. But now, the youngest whispered, her voice tilting into something unnatural. The hills know you. Elena froze. What? The sisters pointed behind her. Elena turned and saw the woods glowing, not with light, but with eyes. Hundreds. Watching her. Surrounding her, silent. Those are the others who woke before you, the youngest said calmly. The ones who never escaped their coffins. Elena's heart nearly stopped. The Holloway sisters were not the only ones buried alive, the oldest said. This land is full of the restless dead, the middle added. And now, the youngest whispered, stepping behind Elena, placing a cold palm against her back. They smell your breath. A branch snapped sharply in the woods. Something stepped forward, and Elena realized with icy terror. The eyes were moving closer, fast. The glowing eyes crept closer. Elena's lungs tightened as if invisible fingers were wrapped around her chest. Branches snapped. Leaves crackled under dozens, no, hundreds of steps. What are they? She whispered, voice cracking. The Holloway sisters didn't answer at first. They only stepped backward in perfect unison, their translucent forms flickering. They are what our father made, the oldest finally whispered. They are what this land swallowed, the middle added. They are what you could have become, the youngest finished. Elena stumbled back as shapes emerged from the tree line. Not spirits, not shadows. Bodies, human bodies. Rotting, dirt-stained, wearing torn funeral clothes. Faces sunken in, mouths half open, eyes glowing faint blue like dying lantern flames. They walked crookedly, heads twitching, necks cracked at unnatural angles. Some dragged broken legs. Some crawled, fingernails clawing through the soil. Some were missing chunks of flesh, ribs showing, yet still moving. All of them breathed, ragged, hollow, echoing breaths like wind forced through a corpse's throat. Elena backed up until her spine hit a tree. No, this can't be real, she whispered. The middle Holloway sister turned to her. They were buried alive, she said softly. But unlike us, the oldest added. They didn't die, the youngest finished. A corpse lunged forward, its jaw cracking open. Elena screamed, but the sisters stood between her and the dead, raising their pale hands. The corpses stopped instantly, as if frozen by command. They don't obey you, Elena gasped. No, the oldest replied. They obey the curse. The middle turned to look at the forest of breathing corpses. They obey the thing beneath the mountain. The youngest kneeled beside one of the dead, placing a gentle palm on its cracked cheek. They obey the whisper you heard. Elena's heart hammered so violently it hurt. The corpse the youngest touched suddenly inhaled, a deep, long, rattling breath, and tilted its head toward Elena. They sense you, the oldest said. You survived what they didn't, the middle added. You escaped the coffin, the youngest whispered. And escaped souls attract devourers. Elena felt her vision blur, panic rising like a flood. What do they want from me? The sisters exchanged a long, grim look. The oldest answered quietly. They want your breath. Before Elena could ask what that meant, the forest erupted with movement, not from the corpses, but from deeper inside. A new sound thundered out. Not footsteps, not breathing, but something far heavier, like a giant dragging a coffin behind it. The corpses immediately dropped to their knees, spines bowing forward in perfect synchrony. Heads pressed to the dirt, the Holloway sisters backed up in fear. Actual fear. "Elena," the middle sister whispered. "Do not move," the youngest hissed. "What is it?" Elena's voice shook so violently she barely recognized it. The oldest sister stared into the darkness between the trees, her face pale. "It is the one who commands them." The dragging sound grew louder, closer. Every tree trembled. Every corpse shook like a terrified animal. And then, a massive shadow stepped into view, its body tall enough to scrape the lowest branches. A shape wrapped in rotting burial linens. Arms impossibly long, ending in dirt-blackened fingers. Its head tilted, listening, following Elena's trembling breaths. "Don't breathe," the youngest whispered desperately. "Don't breathe. Don't." Elena clamped her hand over her mouth. The creature stopped, sniffed the air, then slowly turned its head directly toward her hiding spot. The youngest sister grabbed Elena's wrist. "Run!" The sisters yanked her away from the clearing, just as the enormous corpse beast tore through the trees in a thunderous, earth-shaking charge. Branches snapped like gunfire. Roots ripped from the soil. The corpses scattered in every direction. Elena sprinted through the forest, lungs burning, branches whipping her face, the Holloway sisters floating beside her, dragging her when she stumbled. Behind them, the monster roared, a guttural, echoing howl that shook the entire hillside. The middle sister grabbed Elena's arm. "We need to get to the old chapel." The youngest screamed, "Now!" The oldest sister turned back, eyes wide in horror. "Because that is not our father," Elena gasped, stumbling over roots. "Then WHO is IT?" The oldest didn't look back as she yelled, "It is the first buried. The one who taught our father how." Something enormous crashed down behind them. The ground split. Trees toppled as if slapped aside. The huge, corpse-bound creature was almost on them. Its glowing white eyes locked onto Elena like a starving predator. The sisters screamed in unison, "Go!" Elena bolted forward with the last of her strength. As the monster's hand slammed into the dirt inches behind her, the impact shaking the entire mountain, Elena burst through the trees, lungs on fire, legs shaking under her own weight. The Holloway sisters glided beside her, their forms flickering like dying candle flames. "There!" the middle sister cried, pointing ahead. Through the fog, a decaying wooden structure slowly materialized. Half-collapsed roof, shattered windows, vines swallowing its walls. The old hilltop chapel. The three sisters shoved her toward it. "Elena, go!" The oldest snapped. Behind them, the earth exploded, the massive corpse beast tearing through the forest, uprooting trees like weeds. Its roar rattled Elena's bones. She sprinted, stumbling up the chapel steps, nearly collapsing through the splintered door. Inside, the air was damp and heavy, thick with mold and old incense. Rotten pews lay overturned. Broken hymn books littered the floor. Candles long dead had melted into misshapen lumps. The sisters entered behind her, and immediately froze. Elena turned. "What's wrong?" The oldest raised a trembling hand toward the far end of the chapel. "Elena, look!" At first she saw nothing, just darkness pooled in the altar. Then her eyes adjusted, and she saw the portraits, row after row of old cracked paintings covering the walls, each framed in warped blackened wood, each portrait depicting a young woman, each woman with the same face as the Holloway sisters, but older. And older still. And older still. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Names carved faintly beneath them. Abigail Holloway, 1731. Margaret Holloway, 1764. Elspeth Holloway, 1809. Rosanna Holloway, 1822. Lydia Holloway, 1841. Clara Holloway, 1853. And on. And on. The same features. The same eyes. The same spirit-worn expression. A bloodline of trapped souls. Elena stepped backward in horror. What is this?" "Our lineage," the middle sister whispered. "Our prison," the youngest added. "Our curse," the oldest finished. Before Elena could speak, the chapel door splintered behind them. The monster slammed against it, the entire building shaking. Dust rained from the ceiling. The wooden beams groaned. The sisters rushed Elena deeper inside. "He cannot enter," the oldest said. "Not fully." "Why?" Elena cried. "This chapel was built above the first grave," the youngest whispered. "The grave of the woman who began it all." Elena blinked, breath trembling. "The one who created the curse?" "No." The middle sister shook her head. "The one who was chosen by it." Lightning snapped outside. The sky crackled white. Elena stepped toward the altar, drawn by something she couldn't explain. There, behind dusty cobwebs, hung a final portrait, massive, taller than she was. The frame carved from dark rootwood that seemed almost alive. Elena wiped the dust and froze. The woman in the portrait looked exactly like her. Same eyes, same hair, same shape of the jaw. A perfect, uncanny mirror through time. Below it, burned into the wood, Eleanor Holloway, the first buried, 1621. Elena staggered back so hard she hit a pew. This is impossible. The sisters exchanged grave looks. The monster outside roared again, shaking the chapel violently. The youngest whispered, "We feared it from the moment we found you." The middle whispered, "We felt it when you heard the whisper in the coffin." The oldest stepped closer, her voice soft and mournful. "Elena, you were never just another visitor." She reached out and touched Elena's trembling hands. "You are her echo." "No," Elena said weakly. "You are her voice." The sisters backed away. "You are the one the mountain has waited for." Outside, the monster howled so loudly the chapel windows shattered. The sisters spoke together, their voices soft but shaking. "You are the return of the first buried." Elena felt her mind split in two, terror fighting the horrifying familiarity rising in her blood. "But why would this curse choose me?" The oldest finally told her. "Because Eleanor Holloway didn't die in her grave. Her soul never passed on. She stayed beneath the mountain, and now she wants her body back." Elena felt a cold breath on her neck, but none of the sisters were behind her. A whisper curled around her ear. "Wake!" The same whisper she heard in the coffin. Elena collapsed to her knees. Inside her skull, memories that weren't hers flooded violently. Being dragged by villagers. Being nailed into a coffin. Screaming until her throat bled, her fingernails clawing wood. A voice whispering in the earth. "Wake!" The chapel suddenly went dead silent. The monster outside stopped roaring, stopped moving, stopped breathing. The sisters stared at Elena, not with fear, but with recognition. "Elena," the youngest whispered, "you are hearing her, aren't you?" Elena lifted her head, and her eyes glowed faint blue. The storm outside Holloway farmhouse had finally died, but inside the walls, a different kind of storm had begun. A storm that breathed. A storm that watched. A storm that remembered. Eleanor Holloway hadn't slept since the photograph arrived. The photograph of Marion Holloway, the youngest sister, the one declared dead, the one buried, the one whose eyes were open in the post-mortem portrait. Not open accidentally. Not open because of rigor mortis. Open like she was looking straight at the photographer and straight through time. Eleanor had burned the photograph twice. It kept coming back unburnt. Tonight, the wind rattled the back window, not like a gust, but like knuckles. 3 taps. A pause. 3 more. Eleanor froze. It was the old Holloway family knock, the secret pattern they used as children so no one else would enter their room. Only the 3 sisters knew it. And one of them was dead. Or supposed to be. Her voice trembled. "Marion?" Silence. Then a breath. Not hers. Not human. Cold, slow, dragging across the room like a dying thing trying to inhale. Eleanor rose from her chair, candle trembling in her hand. The flame bent, not from wind, but from something passing by it. Something unseen. Then she heard it. A soft, wet grind of dirt falling onto the floorboards. She looked down. A trail of soil stretched across the wooden planks. Fresh. Black. Graveyard soil. No footprints. Just dragged marks, as though something crawled, not walked. At the end of the dirt trail lay a torn piece of fabric, off-white linen. Eleanor knew it instantly. It was the burial sleeve from Marion's dress. Her throat dried. Then, the mirror beside her flickered. Not from light, from movement inside the reflection. Slowly, painfully, a hand pressed against the inside of the mirror's glass. Fingers stiff, skin bruised purple, nails cracked. The hand of a girl pulled from a coffin too soon. Eleanor stumbled backward, choking on air. The hand slid down the mirror, leaving a smear of soil and something darker, thicker. Then Marion's face appeared. Not dead, not alive. Something between. Her eyes were impossibly wide, pupils dilated. The same look she had in the post-mortem photo. A look of someone trying to scream but trapped inside silence. Her mouth opened slightly, shaking, like she was forcing out words she had no breath for. A faint whisper escaped the mirror. Broken. Wet. Barely human. Eleanor. Eleanor felt her entire body lock. Marion blinked once. Slowly, painfully, then her jaw cracked sideways, unnatural, sharp, like bone snapping in reverse. Eleanor screamed, finally, and ran for the door. It slammed shut on its own. Every window darkened. The candle died without smoke. The room dropped 5 degrees instantly, and from the mirror, Marion's whisper returned. Not pleading, not calling, commanding. Don't let them bury me again. The mirror shattered. The candle relit itself, and behind Eleanor, something began breathing again. Louder. Closer. Alive. Or wishing it was. The shards of the shattered mirror lay scattered across the floor like pieces of a broken truth, each one reflecting a tiny, distorted fragment of the room. Each one also reflecting something else. A shape. A figure. Standing behind Eleanor. Breathing. But when she spun around, there was nothing there, just the stale air bending in waves as if something invisible had moved through it. Then, a soft crunch. A footstep. On broken glass. Eleanor backed away slowly. Her heart hammered against her ribs, each beat tightening her chest like a hand squeezing from the inside. The dirt trail on the floor had grown longer, darker, wetter, and at the end of it, the boards were buckling. Something underneath them was pushing upward, something desperate, something trapped. The candle flame stretched toward the floorboards, like a body being pulled toward a grave. Eleanor whispered, barely audible, "Marian." The floor let out a low, dry moan. Then it cracked. A pale finger burst through the plank, thin, trembling, caked in grave soil. Then another. And another. Slowly, agonizingly, a hand emerged, not reaching for help. Reaching for her. Eleanor stumbled back, her breath quivering in her throat. The hand dug its nails into the wood, pulling up the rest of the arm. Dirt spilled everywhere, fresh, black, damp. Then she saw the wrist. A deep bruise. A cuff mark. Like someone had held her down, forced her still. Declared her dead. Marian hadn't simply been buried alive. Someone had made sure she stayed alive long enough to feel it. The boards ripped wider. An elbow surfaced. A shoulder, then half a face. Eyes closed, lips cracked, skin gray with silence. Eleanor couldn't breathe. Marian's eyelids twitched. Once, twice. Then they slid open, slowly, as if waking from centuries instead of days. Her gaze wasn't empty. It was furious. Her dead pupils locked onto Eleanor like she recognized her, or blamed her. Marian's mouth moved, but only a rasp came out. Dry, sandpapered. Youlefme. Eleanor shook her head violently, tears spilling. "And no, we were told you weren't breathing, the doctor." Marian's eyes rolled upward, whites filling the room with a sickening cold light. The doctor knew. Eleanor froze. The air thickened. The temperature sank. And every portrait on the wall, the Holloway ancestors, suddenly tilted as if bowing their heads in dread. Marian pushed further out of the floor, her movements jerky, wrong, like bones refusing to bend the way flesh demanded. Then her jaw clicked open. A sound like a coffin lid snapping. From her throat, a whisper dragged out, not her voice. Deeper, multiple voices layered, like the dead behind her were speaking too. "They buried me with something else, something that wants you." The candle extinguished. The house exhaled. And in the pitch black, something brushed Eleanor's ankle. Not a hand. Not a cloth. Something cold. Something breathing. Something that didn't belong to Marian, but had come back with her. The darkness inside the room was thick enough to feel. Heavy, damp, clinging to Eleanor's skin like the breath of the dead. She didn't dare move. Whatever had brushed her ankle was still there. Waiting. Breathing. Listening. A faint scraping sound rose from the floor, like nails dragging across a wooden coffin lid. Eleanor forced her trembling voice out. "Marian, is something down there with you?" Marian's head turned unnaturally fast, her neck bending at an angle that made the air tighten. Her voice came through cracked lips, quiet yet slicing. "They didn't bury me alone." Thunder rolled outside, rumbling through the bones of the house. Lightning flashed, revealing something Eleanor had missed before. More dirt, not just around Marian, but spreading everywhere, like something else was crawling upward following her. Marian's eyes shifted downward toward the hole she'd escaped from, eyes wide, terrified, as if even in death she feared what she had been buried with. Eleanor whispered, "Then, who was in the coffin?" Marian shook her head slowly. Not who, what. A deep thud echoed beneath the floorboards. Then another. Then, a long, low growl, so deep it vibrated the walls. Eleanor stumbled backward, her hand striking the dresser. The mirror shards rattled violently, reflecting tiny flashes of something moving beneath the cracks in the wood. Something big, something wrong. Marian's decaying fingers clutched Eleanor's dress. Her grip was ice cold, desperate. "It followed me back." Her Her voice trembled with a fear Eleanor had never heard from her little sister. Not in life, not in memory. It wants you too. It always wanted you. The thudding grew louder. Closer. The floorboards bulged upward in several places now, as though enormous hands were pressing from below. Eleanor's breath hitched. Why me? Marian leaned closer, her forehead touching Eleanor's, her voice barely a whisper. Because you were supposed to take my place. Eleanor's vision blurred. Her body shook. No, Marian. Mother said it was your illness. It wasn't illness. Marian's dead eyes widened. It was selection. The word hung in the air like poison. Thunder cracked again, and in the split-second flash of white light, Eleanor glimpsed it. A massive, twisted shape beneath the boards. A silhouette with limbs too long, a face too flat, eyes like hollow lanterns glowing in the dark. Then, the boards shattered. A long arm shot out, gray, leathery, covered in dirt, ending in fingers far too many, moving like a cluster of spiders. It slammed onto the floor, dragging up the rest of the creature, each movement wet and unnatural. Marian screamed, a sound no human throat should make. Eleanor froze as the creature crawled up from the earth, its head twitching, turning, sniffing, searching. For her. It knew her name. She felt it. She felt it calling her, the same way it had called Marian from her grave. The creature's mouth opened, slow, impossibly wide, filled not with teeth but with tiny, writhing fingers reaching outward. Reaching for Eleanor, trying to pull her down with it. Marian grabbed Eleanor and yanked her back behind her, shielding her with her own decayed body. Run, she rasped, her voice breaking, her bones shaking. Run before it remembers why you were chosen. The creature lunged, the house roared, and the darkness swallowed them both. The storm above the Holloway house had stopped hours ago, but inside the walls, the storm had just begun. Eleanor didn't sleep that night. She sat in the corner of her room, back against the wardrobe, and stared at her left forearm. The bruises that Marian had pressed there. The shape of her fingers burned like coal into skin. But something else pulsed beneath the bruises. A faint black line, thin as a thread, curving like a handwritten signature, and glowing whenever she touched it. She rubbed it until her skin nearly tore. It didn't fade. It pulsed, like a heartbeat, like something alive under her flesh. She whispered to herself, terrified. What did she put inside me? A soft knock on the door answered her. Not 3 knocks, not 5, 4. Slow, precise, just like the creature's rhythm under the floorboards. Eleanor didn't breathe. The doorknob turned. It didn't creak. It clicked, clean, deliberate, like someone who knew exactly how to enter silently. The door opened only a few inches. In the narrow gap, an eye stared at her, cold, blue, unblinking. Marian, except her pupils were wrong. Too wide, too dark, too hungry. Marian whispered in a voice that wasn't quite hers. It chose you. Eleanor froze. Marian stepped inside, moving with the slow grace of a puppet pulled by invisible strings. Her nightgown was soaked with dirt again, dirt that smelled like something freshly dug from the earth. She pointed at Eleanor's arm. You shouldn't hide it. Eleanor covered her arm anyway. Marian tilted her head sharply, like a bird listening for worms beneath soil. The mark grows faster if you resist. Eleanor's voice trembled. What is it? Marian smiled, too wide, her lips stretching in a way no human muscle should allow. A promise. The black line beneath Eleanor's skin crawled a full inch upward. She gasped, biting back a scream. Marian took another step closer. Her breath smelled like wet leaves, and the stale air of a coffin that had been open too long. Our family didn't bury us to kill us, Eleanor. She leaned closer, whispering right into Eleanor's ear. They buried us so it could find us. Eleanor's heart slammed against her ribs. The mark throbbed like fire. Marian gently took Eleanor's hand and turned her wrist upward. Do you feel it calling you? Eleanor yanked her hand back. Marian didn't react with anger. She reacted with disappointment, as if a child had broken a toy. You're the only one it wants this time. Eleanor managed to speak. Why me? Why not you? Marian blinked. Slowly. Almost thoughtfully. It already had me. Eleanor's breath caught. She whispered, the night you came back from the grave? That wasn't you? Marian's eyes softened in a way that broke Eleanor's heart. For a moment, a very small moment, she looked like the real Marian. I tried to come back, she said softly. But something came with me. Her voice cracked. She lifted her hand and pressed 2 fingers against Eleanor's chest, right over her heartbeat. And now it wants you to finish what our ancestors began. Eleanor shoved her away, panic flooding her body. Stay away from me. Marian's head snapped up sharply. Her voice turned lower, deeper, layered with another voice beneath it. Ancient, cold, not human. You cannot run. You carry its mark. Eleanor sprinted out of the room, slamming the door behind her. She didn't stop to breathe, didn't stop to think. She ran down the hallway, her bare feet slapping against the old boards. Behind her, Marian's voice echoed, no longer whispering but full, resonant, vibrating the walls. "The earth knows your name now." Eleanor stumbled down the stairs. Behind her, something began crawling out of her bedroom. Not Marian, not fully, something moving with joints that weren't meant to bend, following her, hunting her, because of the mark, because it had chosen her. And Eleanor realized she wasn't just running from the creature, she was becoming its next vessel. Eleanor didn't stop running until she reached the farthest end of the house, the narrow door that led into the old Holloway attic. A place no one entered, a place her mother always kept locked. A place Marian had been found standing in the night, 2 days before she was buried alive. The door was half open now, as if it had been waiting. Eleanor hesitated at the bottom of the stairs. Marian's voice floated up the hallway behind her, too soft, too steady, like a hymn spoken through someone else's lungs. "You cannot leave, Eleanor. The soil remembers." Eleanor pushed into the attic and slammed the door. The air inside was thick with dust and secrets. Moonlight slipped between the cracks in the roof, illuminating shapes covered in sheets, old trunks, broken furniture, and abandoned belongings of Holloways who had died a century ago. And at the center of the room, a small wooden table. On it lay a single object, a black, leather-bound book. Its cover was cracked like dry earth. Its edges burned, but it pulsed, barely noticeable, but alive. Like something inside it breathed. Eleanor stepped closer. The book's clasp was shaped like a small skeletal hand, gripping the cover shut. A Holloway hand. Her stomach churned. She opened it. Dust erupted upward, and pages, yellowed, torn, stained with something darker than ink, fluttered open to a chapter marked with a blood-red symbol. A symbol that matched the mark growing under Eleanor's skin. The page title, "The Twinning Burial, 1813 Rite of Selection." Her throat tightened as she read the first lines. A Holloway daughter must be buried alive beside her sister so the earth may choose which one returns. Eleanor froze. Her eyes trembled across the next sentence. Only the chosen returns breathing. But she returns carrying the mark of the soil, bound to complete the pact. Buried alive. Chosen by the earth. Returned, carrying something inside. Eleanor's voice shook as she whispered, "Marian." No wonder Marian wasn't fully herself. She didn't come back alone. She kept reading. Her fingers shook so badly she tore a corner of the page. The returned sister is incomplete until she delivers the next offering. The next of blood. The next in line. And at the bottom of the page, a drawing. A twisted figure of a girl crawling out of a grave, her eyes black, her hand reaching not upward, but toward another girl standing above the earth. A girl who looked exactly like Eleanor. Eleanor slammed the book shut. In that same instant, she heard it. A soft thud behind her. She spun around. The attic door had opened. Marian stood there, silhouetted in the pale light. Her hair dangled wet with dirt. Her nightgown was torn open down the front like something had clawed its way out of her chest. And her face wasn't Marian's anymore. It was stretched, pulled, elongated as if the bones underneath were rearranging. Marian stepped forward slowly, her feet dragging across the wooden boards. She saw the book in Eleanor's hands. She smiled. A broken, cracked smile that didn't belong on any human mouth. "You read it." Eleanor backed toward the window. "Stay away from me, Marian." Marian tilted her head, the bones in her neck cracking like dry twigs. "I tried to warn you. I begged them not to choose us." Her voice changed, layers of whispers leaking underneath the words. "But the soil always takes what belongs to it." She pointed at Eleanor's forearm. The black mark beneath Eleanor's skin glowed brighter, branching like black veins spreading outward. Marian whispered, "It's almost complete." Eleanor gasped. The pain shot up her arm like fire. "What does it want?" Marian stepped closer, and this time, she didn't blink. "It wants its sister back." Eleanor froze, shaking. "I'm not dead," Marian whispered, her breath cold as winter earth. "You will be." Something moved behind Marian, not a shadow, a shape, crawling, stretching, rising from beneath the floorboards. The creature, the earth's chosen, the thing that lived inside Marian. Eleanor didn't think. She grabbed the book and ran toward the attic window. Ran as the creature's long fingers scraped across the wooden floor behind her. Ran as Marian screamed a sound that was not a human sound but something ancient and starved. Eleanor threw herself against the window, and as it shattered, she heard Marian whisper behind her, "You cannot escape the burial, Eleanor. You were born for it." Eleanor didn't die when she leapt out of the attic window. She wished she had. She crashed into the mud below, the broken glass slicing her arms and face, the breath knocked out of her chest. Rainwater filled her mouth as she gasped for air, coughing, choking, clawing her way upright. Inside the house, something was moving toward the window. Not Marian, not human. Eleanor staggered to her feet and ran, slipping, stumbling, forcing her legs forward. The wind howled like it carried voices inside it. The trees bent as if trying to grab her dress. Every direction looked wrong, the woods twisting into unfamiliar shapes. Behind her, a wet, dragging sound echoed. S-C-R-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-A-P-E. Scrape. S-K-R-A-A-A. Ape. The creature climbing out. She sprinted to the old horse barn near the edge of the Holloway property, a place abandoned since her great-grandfather's time. A place no one ever entered because the floorboards had collapsed over a deep root cellar long ago. She threw open the rotting doors and stumbled inside. The barn smelled like damp hay and rotted wood. The wind shook the rafters overhead. Eleanor leaned against a stall gate, panting, her heartbeat pounding inside her skull. The mark on her arm glowed again. A branching network now, spreading across her wrist, her elbow, creeping toward her shoulder like inky fingers. She grabbed a rusted horseshoe from the ground and pressed the cold metal against her skin, hoping to stop the throbbing. It grew brighter, hotter, as if reacting to something nearby. Then she heard it, a hollow thump beneath her feet. Once. Then again, slow, steady. A heartbeat. But from the floor, she stepped back, staring at the rotting planks. The heartbeat grew louder. Thump, 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 she whispered. Oh God, no. A voice came through the cracks, muffled, distant, yet unmistakably human. A woman's voice. Eleanor. Eleanor's spine turned to ice. Eleanor, help me. She knelt, hands shaking, pressing her ear to the floorboards. The voice grew clearer. Eleanor, I can't breathe. Her breath trembled. She whispered, Marion. But the voice wasn't Marion's. It was older, cracked. Fragile. You must open it, the voice pleaded. Please. I've been waiting so long. Eleanor's stomach twisted. Her fingers traced along the floorboards until she found it, an iron ring set into the wood. Rusted, hidden beneath years of dust. A cellar door. She reached for it, and froze. The voice below changed. Not the words, the tone. Too calm. Too patient. Open it, Eleanor. Her hand stopped inches from the ring. The mark on her arm flared so hot she screamed. The voice below echoed her scream. Same pitch, same pain, mirroring her perfectly. Mocking her. You cannot hide, the voice whispered. You are already ours. Then, a second voice, deeper, layered like it came from a throat filled with dirt. Open it. The floorboards bulged upward. Eleanor stumbled back as a long, thin, gray hand pushed through the crack between the planks. Fingers impossibly long, nails curved like claws. The hand groped blindly across the barn floor, searching for her. Eleanor staggered back toward the barn doors. As she pulled them open, she saw someone outside. Marion, standing in the rain, but the way she stood, perfectly still. Hands at her sides, head tilted back as if watching something above the clouds. Her eyes were pitch black. The creature beneath the floorboards slammed against the cellar door. The boards cracked. Eleanor screamed, Marion, run! Marion didn't move. She slowly lowered her head and smiled. You found the grave, she whispered. The creature's hand reached farther out of the floor. The barn shook. The wind screamed. Marion stepped forward. Now you must finish what I started. Eleanor ran from the barn, but the mark on her arm pulsed like a chain dragging her back. She wasn't running away from her fate. She was running toward it, toward the grave that waited beneath the floor, toward the thing calling her name from the earth, toward the burial she was never meant to escape. The rain fell harder as Eleanor fled from the barn, the storm crushing the world around her into a haze of mud and shadow. The trees twisted under the wind, their shapes moving like creatures watching her stumble through the dark. Her lungs burned. Her legs barely obeyed her, but the mark on her arm, that black branching stain, pulled at her like a leash. Every pulse felt like a fist tightening around her heart. Behind her, the barn doors moaned open, not from the wind, from something pushing them. Dragging itself out. The dragging grew louder. Scrape. Sciare ape. Scrape. She didn't dare look back. If she saw it, she knew she'd freeze. Instead, she forced herself toward the oldest part of the Holloway land, where the family graveyard lay buried under wild vines and leaning headstones. Lightning split the sky. For a moment, everything lit up. The trees, the rows of crooked tombstones, the dead earth where dozens of Holloways had been buried. And standing among them, Marion. The rain didn't touch her. Her hair floated weightlessly around her face as if she were underwater. Her eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the lightning. Eleanor's feet skidded to a stop. Her voice cracked. Marion, please help me. Marion stepped forward. One slow, effortless step. I tried to help you. Her voice carried the quiet calm of a grave. But you opened the book. Eleanor clutched the leather-bound ritual book under her arm. "Just tell me how this ends." Marian raised her hand, palm up, like she was listening to something Eleanor could not hear. And then she whispered, "It ends where it began." Lightning struck again. This time, Eleanor saw it. A freshly dug plot behind Marian, a long rectangular void in the ground. A grave. Her grave. A wooden coffin sat half submerged in the mud, lid open, waiting. No name carved on the headstone yet. Just a single phrase etched in deep ancient cuts. "The return must be reclaimed." Eleanor staggered back. "No, no, Marian, I'm not going in there." Marian tilted her head gently, like a caretaker soothing a child. "You don't have to climb in." Her voice dropped, turning colder. "You just have to stop fighting." From the trees behind Eleanor, the dragging sound grew louder. Closer. Something massive was crawling toward her. The creature from the cellar. Lightning flashed again, and she saw it coming through the rain. Long limbs bent the wrong way, mud dripping from its ribcage, a mouth too wide, filled with soil instead of teeth, empty sockets with wet roots dangling. The earth had shaped this thing. The burial had created it. It hissed her name without a mouth. "Eleanor." Eleanor screamed and ran, but her legs locked halfway, her muscles seizing. The mark on her arm blazed with burning cold, spreading to her chest. She collapsed to her knees, gasping, her vision blurred. The ground beneath her pulsed like it was breathing. Marian knelt beside her, rain hissing off her skin like steam. She gently touched Eleanor's cheek. "I died alone, Eleanor." Her voice trembled for the first time. As if the memory still hurt. "I clawed upward in the dark for hours, my lungs full of dirt, wishing someone would save me." A tear, dark as ink, rolled down Marian's cheek. No one did. Her expression shifted. Compassion melting into something hollow and merciless. "But I can save you. You don't have to die alone." Eleanor shook her head, sobbing. "I won't go into that grave. I won't." Marian pressed her finger to Eleanor's lips. "Shh. The earth wants you." The creature loomed behind Eleanor now, its rotten fingers reaching, its chest gurgling with wet soil. As it touched her shoulder, the ground split beneath Eleanor. The mud softened into hands. Hands became arms. Arms became a pull. She was being dragged toward the open coffin. Marian leaned close, whispering into Eleanor's hair. "Surrender, sister. The Holloway blood belongs to the ground." Eleanor screamed, clawing at the mud. Kicking, crying for help that would never come. The creature wrapped its limbs around her waist. The coffin lid creaked. Marian whispered in a voice colder than winter. "This is your burial, Eleanor?" The earth swallowed Eleanor's lower body. The coffin pulled her in. Lightning lit the sky one last time, and the lid snapped shut. Darkness. Complete. But inside the coffin, Eleanor's eyes remained open. And something inside the dark opened its eyes back. The night pressed against the walls of the Holloway house like something alive, breathing, waiting. The storm outside had died, but its silence left behind a weight that felt even heavier. The kind of quiet that comes right before the ground breaks open, or the dead decide they aren't finished. For the first time in hours, Clara Holloway opened her eyes. Not in the photograph, not in the memory, but in the present, standing at the top of the staircase, barefoot, her dress still covered in dried soil, soil that should have stayed sealed in her coffin. Her sisters were behind her. Emma and Ruth, faces pale and sunken, their eyes reflecting that same hollow yearning that had haunted the town for decades. But something had changed. They weren't reaching for death anymore. They were reaching for replacement. Clara stepped down, one wooden stair creaking with every careful move. Miriam froze in place, her lungs tight, her feet rooted to the floor even as every instinct in her body screamed to run. But Clara wasn't looking at Miriam. She was looking at the camera. The same Victorian camera the sisters once died posing for. The same one that had captured their last breath. And Clara whispered, voice dry as earth, soft as a whisper from beneath dirt. "One more." Emma moved closer. Ruth's cracked lips spread into a thin, unnatural smile. Their pale fingers brushed the frame of the camera. They wanted one more photograph, but this time, they wanted the living beside them. Miriam's voice shook. "Why me?" Clara tilted her head, and for the first time, her expression softened, almost human. "Because you looked at us." A simple sentence. A devastating truth. Because Miriam saw them. Saw their suffering. Saw their pain. Saw the burial that had never been meant to happen, and that acknowledgement bound her to them. The attic door slammed shut behind her. The air dropped to freezing, and all three Holloway sisters stepped into position, like old instincts awakening, forming a triangle around the camera. Their shadowy figures flickered with each flash of distant lightning. The sisters didn't blink. They didn't move. They simply waited, the way the dead wait when time no longer applies. Miriam's breath trembled as she stepped backward, but the floor groaned, almost warning her. She was already chosen. Clara extended her hand again, not grabbing, not forcing, just asking. A strange sorrow crossed her undead face, and for a moment, Miriam saw not monsters, but girls who never had a chance to live. Girls buried alive in a cruel mistake. Girls trapped in a photograph, screaming silently for someone to help them finish their final moment. Slowly, painfully, Miriam raised her hand and placed it into Clara's cold grip. The temperature shot through her bones like frost carving veins. The camera's shutter clicked on its own. Flash. The room lit white. Clara blinked. Emma breathed. Ruth's eyes widened, like someone waking from a long nightmare. And then, just like that, the three sisters collapsed, motionless. Still. Peaceful. For the first time since 1863, they looked dead in a way that felt right. Their spirits, bound for decades, had passed in the one way they never got to. Through a completed photograph, Miriam stepped back, gasping, her heart hammering. The attic window blew open, letting in a warm, gentle gust, almost like a relieved sigh. Then she noticed the camera. The picture slid out, a fresh, sepia-toned image. The Holloway sisters stood together, smiling faintly at peace. And behind them, faint but unmistakably present, Miriam, her face ghostly, blurred, almost transparent. A fourth figure joining the trio. Her stomach dropped, because the Holloway curse didn't steal life. It shared it. Her reflection in the window looked the same. Her breathing was the same. Her heartbeat was loud and real, but the photograph whispered otherwise. A chill slipped down her spine. She wasn't dead, not yet, but part of her now lived with them forever. And somewhere deep in the house, beneath the wooden floorboards, the soil shifted softly, like something old settling into place. The Holloway sisters were finally at rest. But Miriam Holloway? Her story was just beginning. And now you know the truth behind the photograph that should have never existed. A girl who was buried alive, dug up, posed beside her already dead sisters, and forced into a final image that refused to stay silent. A family destroyed. A graveyard haunted. And a picture that still surfaces, in attics, in barns, in abandoned houses of the Ozarks, as if it's trying to return to the living. Some say the Holloway sisters finally rest. Others say the youngest one still searches for the breath she was denied. If you ever find that photograph, the one with the three pale faces and the girl whose eyes aren't fully closed, don't look too long. Don't blink too slowly, because those who stare long enough swear they hear fingernails scratching, like someone is still trying to climb out. Thank you for watching Forgotten Remains, where the dead are never truly silent, and forgotten stories refuse to stay buried. Until the next haunting, lock your doors, trust your shadows, and never, ever open old photo albums alone.